All right, I think we are live here. Let everyone trickle in for a few minutes, and while we do that, I should probably figure out how to share my screen. New year, new me. Yeah. All right. What's up, everyone? Let me know where you're tuning in from in the chat as I get the slide deck up and running. We're going to do some fun data analysis today. Always a good day to write some code. That's what I always say. Where are people tuning in from? Okay. I don't know what it is. Every time I live stream, and I probably say this in every live stream that I do, I'm always just like overwhelmed by all the different configurations and whatnot, and I guess different windows I have open, and also like I need to work on my video feed because it's so bright behind me that I'm just like. All right. Here we go. Ooh, Bangladesh, Venezuela, Helsinki, India, Georgia, Moscow. We got a lot. Love it. I'm in the state of New Hampshire in the United States right now. Kind of close to the city of Boston. All right. I should be able to screen share now. Oh no, that's weird. I want to make this full screen. Got a Houston, Texas in here. Got Chile. All right. I'm just, I don't know why the settings are weird and why the screen share is only showing this little teeny bit. I don't want that one either. I want this one. I think this will work. Nope. I want the picture in picture. Where's the picture? We're going to try this one more time. There we go. Now you can see me and the slideshow. That's awesome. Also, why is my chat? Where's my chat at? All right, now we're rolling. Now we're rolling. Turn off your halo. Oh no. I don't know what my halo is. Is that just how bright it is? I have a light on, but the background is just super, super bright. All right, well, enough chatting on my part. I've just been rambling on, but welcome everyone that's tuning in and anyone that tunes in into the future. Doing a little internet usage data analysis today. So we have a data set from the World Bank, and I'll show how you can kind of collect this data and access it and whatnot. And also we will be raising some money for giveinternet.org, so awesome cause. Excited to do a little bit of both. And I'll provide a little bit of information, but so goals overall for the presentation: learn some real-world Python analysis skills and raise money for a good cause. A little bit about the sponsor. So in the YouTube live stream, you should be able to see like some information about Give Internet, and you can like make donations. Anything that comes through this live stream will go straight to Give Internet. And there's even a donor that is doing one-to-one matching. But I think like a little bit of background context, and I kind of share this in some LinkedIn posts and whatnot that I made prior to this, but YouTube has been invaluable for me, at least in my learning journey. Like a concrete example was when I was a senior in high school, I ran out of math classes to take because I'm a big nerd. And instead of just not taking math that year, I was able to kind of keep learning math, keep learning calculus. And I did it like 100% basically through different instructors on YouTube that just offered lessons for free. One of the biggest ones was this guy, Patrick JMT. And I just watched like every one of his calculus videos and continued the journey. So I benefited a ton from YouTube, and I started making videos largely to give back a bit and teach whatever I could on YouTube. But I think the big kind of like challenge is that while YouTube is great for everyone that can access the internet and it's free of charge, there's a lot of people that don't even have the ability to access the internet. So this live stream is to hopefully raise some money for people in places where it's harder to get that internet access, and Give Internet ultimately strives to get more and more people connected around the world. And also just a quick mention, we got Elaine in the chat. I want to put her on blast. She can answer any questions that people have about Give Internet. So she'll be kind of moderating the chat throughout the live stream. So feel free to ask any questions, or you can also check out giveinternet.org. This is the first time I've ever done like a live stream fundraiser, so still learning very much myself. A little bit more information about Give Internet, some partners, kind of recapping some of the stuff I mentioned, but ultimately providing laptops and internet access to people in different communities that have a harder time accessing it. Some specific countries, and not all of these I don't think are currently active, but countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Georgia, Ghana, Indonesia, Uganda, India. Kind of one of the reasons I was asking everyone to see where people were tuning in from was because I was curious to see if there was any overlap, and definitely with India, seeing a couple people from there. There's a lot of parts of India that doesn't have a great high percentage of people with internet access. And specifically, I was just kind of curious. This is views on my channel and watch time over the last 90 days. India is at the top of the list, but I was also just curious about some of these countries served by Give Internet. And so here's kind of a breakdown of over the last 90 days, watch time from these places. And, it's a decent chunk. So my goal is hopefully we can raise some money and get higher numbers here, more people connected in these places. But it is kind of I think something that it's hard for me to like realize sometimes with YouTube is just that I'm just sitting here in my little small, room in office, and it's pretty cool that like YouTube can connect all of these places. And it's just like sometimes hard to realize that because commenting and all of this is not, I don't know, I don't sometimes think about it properly. All right, I think that's about it. I think, let me see if I can monitor anything here. If donations are made, something to know about it is that you can donate directly through the YouTube stream. All of the funds go to Give Internet. YouTube doesn't take any cut for fundraisers. The donations will be matched 1-to-1. And this last thing, I don't know if this will actually work, and maybe I'll just do it myself at some point, just if I need a break from analysis. But if you donate, and then you can feel free to type out an exercise. So if you donate $25 and you type out push-ups in the chat, I'll do 25 push-ups. So maybe an extra bit of incentive to donate, and for me to monitor my health and hopefully get a little exercise in while I stream. But I think that's about it. Let's get into some fun data analysis. And also make sure, feel free to ask questions throughout this entire stream. I'm happy to just, whether it be about the actual data we're analyzing or just Python or anything in general, I'll try to pop up some questions and whatnot and answer additional questions throughout. So as I kind of mentioned, we'll be collecting some internet data from the World Bank. if you want to access the data right away, you could, oh no, I have a typo in this, but it should be github.com/Keith Galli /internet usage analysis, GitHub repo. Hopefully that went into the chat, but you can find some information about the data source there. But I'll also, as part of the process, show how we can actually collect data. The World Bank has a lot of good stuff when it comes to getting data to use to, like, if you want to analyze world data, the World Bank is a great spot to go. So I'll kind of show how you can get some data from that source for any potential projects you might want to do. Some data skills that we will use as kind of every one of my, maybe not every one of my videos, but a lot of my videos use a Python Pandas component. This one will be no different. We'll probably use some graphing libraries, matplotlib, plotly, etc. And we'll make sure to use the fun old AI tools, because I feel like you can just code 2,000% faster with these tools if they're used properly. And then you'll start with data collection, do some data cleaning, do some data analysis, and then I'll answer some additional questions. And some questions that we might aim to answer with the data set that we're analyzing. And feel free to type in questions that you have as we start actually getting the data. But here was just some that I wrote down, and we'll kind of see how we can use pandas and different tools to kind of visualize and get answers to these questions. Alrighty, I think that's it. So let's actually start getting into the data collection process. Okay, hopefully you can see this internet window, but I'm going to start by going to that GitHub repo that I mentioned, and I'll make this a bit bigger so everyone can see. I guess it didn't make my search bar bigger, but github.com/Keith Galli /internet usage analysis. And the reason I'm going to this GitHub repo first is that the data source, this portal, is right there, and I forgot the link otherwise. So I'm going to go to the World Bank to start getting some data on internet usage around the world. And if I click on that link, we get to this databank.worldbank.org/source/world development indicators. I'll share this in the chat too. I also probably should share, I can't see the live stream currently, so I don't know what's going on the live stream. I can see the chat. But this is a pretty cool portal that you can get all sorts of very interesting world data from. So to kind of be as inclusive as possible, I'm going to select all of these countries to get our data for. And then we have a bunch of different types of data that we can get. And this might be still too small, so I'm going to increase this a bit. And I think I can even expand this window. So if you can kind of read this, this is like all sorts of data that you have access to for all these different countries. I feel like it's a great data source if you have any sort of portfolio project that you want to build, or you just want to practice your data analysis skills and learn, maybe something about your country and countries around you in the process. Tons and tons of stuff here. I'm kind of getting overwhelmed by how much information and columns that you have available. But because we're looking at internet usage data, I will specifically type in internet here in the search bar. And there might be other things that you would want to access, but I think that this is probably, these 5 columns are probably a good starting point. One thing, if you were to take this to the next step, that I might recommend is looking up some education metrics and kind of adding that to your data source as well. But we'll just start with the internet data. I'm going to select all here. And then over the time period, I will use all years here that I have access to. So that's from 1960 to 2023, and I will apply changes. We see we get a little sample of the data set here for Afghanistan, but I could also, preview the data for other countries, as you can see. So here's Brazil. I saw most recent comment was from Algeria, so here's Algeria in the data set. As we can see, we can go back here. And I'm going to download all of this data. So I'm going to go ahead and download. I'll download a CSV because that's probably the easiest for us to deal with. Let's just call this world data, and I want to save it in my internet usage analysis data folder. So maybe I call it even world internet data. And for convenience, I don't know, it's a zip folder. I don't like that. Hopefully you saw me doing all that. Where did my window go? Sorry, everyone. I'm lost. Oh, and my computer's about to die. Alrighty, all right. Okay, there we go. I downloaded the CSV. It's a zipped folder. I don't think you can see the CSV, but basically have it now saved locally in a directory where I have that GitHub code. So I'll go back to the GitHub spot. And yeah, if you want to access the data but don't want to have to download it the way I just showed, you can access this CSV file in the GitHub repo. So one cool thing, one trick is you can copy this link, and actually within Pandas, you can read the data from this URL directly. Actually, I guess you have to go get the raw data first, but we see we have this raw.github user content data. You can just basically copy this and access the data you want via that. So let's go ahead and start doing some data cleaning so we can start answering some questions about this data. So we got the data from databank.worldbank.org, and now we are going to go ahead and actually start analyzing and cleaning up that data. So let me share my Visual Studio Code tab. All right. Hopefully people can see this screen. I'll move my Visual Studio Code over there. Hopefully people can see Visual Studio Code now. The only issue is that it's quite small on this screen, but I will try to make it bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called something like analysis.ipython notebook. Generate a code cell. Maybe that's slightly too big. And I can just do something like import pandas as PD, df equals pd.read CSV, and then paste in that link I shared, and that will give me my data. So this, I'm pasting in the raw data link right now. It's a really long link, I guess. But if I go ahead and do df.head, we see we have the data locally here. Let me know in the chat if people can see this well enough. I'll hide this over here. I also need to check to make sure that I can see it on my side. Yeah, it seems like it's all showing. But here's what the data looks like currently. And I see a good question in the chat that I will go ahead and answer. How do you come up with analytical questions for such projects? I think it really depends on who you're working with on the project. If it's something you're doing yourself, like honestly, just ask your questions. Ask yourself, like, what are you curious about with the data? So here for like the internet usage data, we have like a bunch of different countries. Like one thing that I'm curious about by just looking at this data is what countries maybe have the most amount of growth recently. So if maybe they had very, very little internet access, very, very little internet access, and then let's say the year 2020 comes by and it spikes up, I want to be able to find that insight from the data. So I'm going to just thinking about what I'm curious about. If you're working in a corporate setting, you'll want to talk to kind of the business stakeholders, people on your team. Ultimately, they'll often dictate what the analytical questions are. And then oftentimes, as a data analyst or a data scientist, like your responsibility is to take those maybe high-level questions and break it down into simpler, concrete steps that you can take to kind of ultimately get to that answer. So that's a little bit of information on the analytical questions. All right, I'll make this full screen. I'm trying to remember all my shortcuts. How do I do, what is the hide explorer or hide explorer shortcut? I think it's like command. I feel like I'm going to accidentally just close out of everything if I try to use shortcuts. Command shift, no, I want to hide the explorer. Command shift E, command shift E. No, that didn't work. How do I hide the sidebar? Command B, command B. Okay, that's the shortcut. I need to learn more shortcuts. All right, so we have our data set here, and I'm loading this long link in, but if you download this file locally, then you can just do something that's more simple, like data/world bank country internet data.csv. And we've loaded that in as our data frame. All right, so, thank you for the command B help there too. Okay, so we have this data, and I think like before I do and try to answer any questions and do any serious analysis on it, I think that like this first step you kind of take with anything is like, how can we clean this to make it a little bit more usable? And there's a few different steps we can take here. I think the first glaring thing that sticks out to me is if we look at our columns. Like, I really hate how these are formatted with 1960 and then year 1960. So I want to clean up those names. Also, maybe I want to clean up these names as well. So I'll show two steps that we can take to do both those things. So first, starting with these names, basically we can just look for a pattern here. So the pattern that I see is like anything that has this bracket in it, I want to just strip away everything to the right here. So if I do something like we can use a list comprehension to help us out here. I could do like column for column in df.columns. And honestly, I could probably just do column 4, right? This would give us the first 4 characters for each column. If we run this, we see we get this. Only issue is that it also takes the first 4 column names that we have. So what we could do is add an if statement to this. So if, how about the space bracket, like year, just even like the start of this. Even if you just did a bracket because none of the other columns has brackets, if brack in column, this will work. Maybe it's not the, I think it's clean enough. Like this is a one-time thing that we have to do, so we don't have to worry about it being the most elegant code long time. And I see a question, do you save it? If you clarify what you mean by the "do you save it" comment, I will provide it extra information. All right. Else, we just want to leave the column as is. So I'm going to see if this works. I might have to move this if statement before the in call. I forget the order in these list comprehensions. So I'm going to try this real quick. Okay, that did not work. For column in column 4, for column in D, I think it might be moving this here. I always forget where my if statements go inside of list comprehensions. Okay, that looked like it worked. So we see that we take the first four characters of our column name if the bracket is in it. Otherwise, we just leave the column alone. So that would be one way to just rename our columns. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as our column. So if I do df columns equals this, then when we look at it again, look at our df columns. Oh, yeah, the live stream will be saved. Don't worry, it will be accessible here. So if you have to leave, you'll be able to access it, whether that be tomorrow, the next day, or any day in the future. Here we go. We got our columns here. I think that these are a little bit easier to work with. We stripped away that annoying year syntax from it. Another thing that I have liked, at least recently, and there's probably other ways to do this, but I use a library called Janitor here. And if you don't have this, I guess one cool thing within a Jupyter Notebook, you can install libraries directly by doing exclamation pip install, and we need to install PyJanitor. PyJanitor gives us access to Janitor. See, we already have it. But if I run this Janitor command, basically, it doesn't, it's kind of, I guess, weird because it doesn't necessarily tell us that we're using anything from Janitor, but ultimately, this Janitor command gives us access to this clean names function. And so if I run this, and then I look at my data frame, instead of having spaces, capitalization, etc. in our names, it's going to just lowercase everything and connect it with underscores. And I just find that this is having a standardized way to deal with your columns is just kind of nice. So I've been liking using this clean names function that's accessible once you import Janitor, at least recently. So you have to pip install PyJanitor to get access to this. All right, so we have cleaned up our column names overall, but we still have a lot of, I guess, other stuff to clean up here in the data to make it workable. I think one question that I have is, does anyone in the chat think that we need all of these columns? I don't know if you're looking at the data. I could even, another nice thing about Visual Studio Code is I can go ahead and look at the CSV, and they give you this preview button. So I'm going to go ahead and preview the data. Hopefully you can see this on the screen, but this is all of our data. And I guess the open question is do I need all of these columns, or do you think that there's a subset of them that I can use? And if so, which subset should I go ahead and kind of filter by? Yeah, I definitely think I could use replace instead of renaming columns. Actually, another, I think, thing that the PyJanitor library gives you access to is you can use functionality called replace columns. There's some a little bit more English readable functions that it gives you access to, instead of having to do something like traditionally you might have to do df.replace, and then you need to specify, I think, your columns, and do something like this. This would definitely work, as Alexander's saying. But I think, and maybe I should go ahead and quickly look at the PyJanitor documentation. It's always fun to learn new libraries. PyJanitor. Okay, PyJanitor. So it gives us some extra functions. Let me see if there's a replace here. Where am I? Oh, here are functions. Oh, like rename columns. Like it gives you special functions to do this in a potentially easier way, depending on, I guess, who you ask. I was hoping to find the GitHub link here. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is like how you would do it normally in Pandas. And we see we have like a rename here. And this is like a way to do it with PyJanitor. So I'll share this in the chat. I do like this idea. I think we'll get to this in a bit, but transposing the year columns, I do very much like this idea, because I think that's a little bit more natural, is to have our years. So when we say transpose, we're basically meaning like take our table data, and I guess I'm blocking myself as I highlight this comment, but we take our table of data and then we basically just like all the rows become columns and vice versa. That's what happens when we transpose the data. So I think transposing the data does make sense as we get into this. One second. I just want to pop open one window. Wait, shoot. What just happened? Okay, we're good. The live stream closed on my side, so I'm just opening a window so I can see the live stream as we go. And anyone that has joined recently, I encourage you to check out the partner here that we're raising money for, giveinternet.org. We have Elaine from Give Internet in the chat to answer any questions about the nonprofit, basically trying to provide laptops and internet to people in communities that, don't have as much access. And hopefully, in the future, that will mean they can watch tutorials like this. I see a question about the HoloViz library. That is definitely a library that I want to play more around with, but I have not personally used it at this point in time. So definitely something that I plan to check out soon. I see some other people suggesting recommendations. You can melt the DF. Yeah, I think we'll get to that kind of on the same lines of the transpose. There's different ways to do this. Melting would be one way. Transpose would be the other. I guess getting back to the original question of like, is there any columns that we can get rid of? I think that one thing that sometimes is not immediately obvious in a data set like this is like, we also have to ask ourselves like about the internet in general. Back in 1960, 1970, 1988, the internet didn't even exist. So we're going to have no data for many of these years, even though we pulled the data for it. So I think basically, if you go back to the early start of the internet and Tim Berners-Lee, when was the internet invented? It's kind of weird for me to even think of a life before the internet, but we see like 1983 is when like the first research and like first semblance of an internet was created, but I don't think that you really saw any public internet until Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web here in 1989. So really, like realistically, we would not have to, I think, look at any data before 1990, let's say, because it's just kind of so irrelevant that we can basically drop all columns after or between 1960 and 1990. So I think just one fun thing to just think about, like sometimes like where the data is even relevant, and a lot of these years are not even relevant to our data. So before we even like get into any transposing or anything of that sort, we can just delete some of these columns. So I always have trouble with like naming my data frame. Like I like just using DF because it's 2 letters, but I feel like as you kind of iterate things, sometimes if you rename and save things as what you had it before, it like just gets messy. I'm trying to think of what I can name this. DF, I don't know, DF small or DF. I don't like DF2 either. Maybe I'll just save it as DF still. I think, okay, so I want to only take the columns that I need. So I want these first 4 columns. So honestly, like selected columns, again, I'm just doing this probably once, so it doesn't matter, but I want these first 4 ones. I could just copy the names. So I might do that. There's different ways to do this. I could use indice values. So I could do something like, I'm trying to think, df.columns. I think I could do something like 0 to 4. And there's some way I think that I can paste in multiple indexed values. Maybe it's using iloc or loc. But we could do it by indexes, or you could do it by just using language. But I'm going to do country name, country code, series name, and series code. That gives us kind of our base, these first 4. But then we want 1990s onward. So ultimately, we will want to like selected years equals string year for year and range. This is doing some good autocomplete. So I have Copilot going in the background. I see that someone is asking a question as I highlight this. So if I go to my extensions, which I also forget the Command Shift X, I use Copilot here. I think Copilot now, there's some Copilot that is free. I think you can access it for free or something, up to an extent. I pay for it. But another one that I've heard recommended in the past is Codium, which I know they have a free tier. So Copilot is what I use, but Codium is another one you might check out. All right, so I want 1990 up to, I think, the last year in this data set. Let's see what we have. 2023. So I'm trying to think if the 2023 is inclusive. I think it is not. So I'm going to go up to 2024. And let's look at our selected years. And I might do this in a new cell, just so we don't run the clean names function again. Wouldn't do anything. Okay, here's our selected years. And we see it has up to 2023. That's good. So ultimately, if we wanted to filter our data set, we could do something like df equals df selected columns plus selected years. And now if we look at our data frame, so I might even just show print data frame or length data frame columns before we run this, and then print length data frame columns after we run this. And we see that we have now eliminated a bunch of those columns. And if we look at our data frame, we have 1990s onward, so much more feasible amount of data to work with. I might honestly like recommend kind of checkpointing this and just being like, you know, df.toCSV data cleaned worldbank.csv as kind of a good starting point, and I usually make the index false. So if we open up our view, this is so embarrassing right now that I'm not using the shortcuts. I don't know what it is. I feel like just because of the okay, Command-Shift-E. I need to get better at these explorers. Let's see. All right, what am I trying to do? Okay, so now run this command, and we will see we have a cleaned world bank. I just sometimes like checkpointing my files as I go, especially when you're working with a Jupyter notebook. It's pretty frustrating to accidentally run cells out of order and whatnot, and then delete stuff that you've done. I feel like my notebooks sometimes get very messy. So I typically, my approach in any sort of data science task is I will create a notebook first and play around with the notebook. But then when I really want to finalize and make something more stable, more repeatable long term, I'll convert it into Python scripts that I can just run a little bit more easily, if that made any sense. I also see there were some donations in the chat, so shout out anyone that has donated so far. Much appreciated. All right. Okay, where are we? Okay, so now we have our cleaned data frame. That's pretty good. And now I think we can kind of get into some of the stuff that people were talking about with transposing the data or similar. So what I might even do before that is let's look at our data again. In the chat, real quick, the next, I guess, 3 people to comment their country we will look at. So the first 3 countries I see in chat, I will filter the data by. So quickly type your country in. Doesn't matter if you've already typed your country in. Next 3 are counted. If it's in the data, I think that every country should be in the data source. We got Greenland up in here. Wow, that's cool. Let's see if I can find Greenland in this data. If I can't find the country in the data, so I'm going to do df.country. We got Germany, Greenland, and Turkey as our 3. And maybe if a couple more trickle in, I'll also included them. Country name. So I'm going to do df.countryname.unique just to see what countries we have. Okay. It is in alphabetical order. We do see Greenland. So let's see how the data for Greenland looks. We missed. I might include others as they typed in. But Greenland, Turkey, and Germany are the first that we'll look at. So I'll call us selected countries equals Greenland. And one thing that we have to be careful of is making sure we type in the country name the same as it's listed in our data frame. A probably better way to actually access these countries, because you don't know what spelling they're going to use. If we were in the United States, I would say United States. I could say United States. I could say United States of America. Maybe I would say Estados Unidos if I was in Mexico. There's many different ways that we can represent a country in language. So I think that the best way to kind of get the selected countries we want, in a more scalable way, would be to use the country codes that you see. But Germany and Turkey were the 3. Do I see Turkey in here? We'll see if this gives us our data. Okay. And now if I just wanted to do country df, I might do df country name.isin selected countries, and then I would do country df.head. So I would probably use the country code as a more scalable way to do this, but let's see if we get everything we want. I only see Germany right now, but that's probably fine because there will be 5 rows for Germany. So we want to see Greenland. Turkey is not there. It's probably spelled a different way. What is the country code for Turkey? Let's see if Copilot knows this. Give me the 3-letter country code for Turkey. I feel like work smarter, not faster. Oh, no. Just use your brain. I'll just look it up. Country code Turkey. No, I don't want the... I forget what you call it. It's like ISO 3, I think. TUR. Okay, so let's see if we can find what the country is listed in for Turkey. Okay, I'm going to create a new cell real quick. DF. So see, we'll find Turkey this way, I bet you. Okay, it's spelled this way. The way it's spelled, this just reminds me of the classic meme that came out of the Olympics. Turkey Olympian shooter. This guy. I should have known the spelling from this Legends shirt, but I did not. I feel like this guy became very, very famous out of the Olympics. TR would be the 2-letter code. I think TUR is the 3-letter. There's different codes that are used at different times. I don't think Wakanda, by the way, will show up in the data set. I do see someone asked for Wakanda in the countries. Unfortunately, I don't think the World Bank is collecting internet usage data on Wakanda at the moment, but yeah, maybe in the future. All right. So we now know Turkey would be spelled this way. The more scalable way to do it would be, I don't want this, discard this, would be to use the country codes. But if you're just doing like some selected analysis, it's totally fine to kind of write some stuff out manually from time to time. You just have to be careful that you're getting it correctly. And we now see our 3 different countries. I think now it's going to be hard to do any sort of meaningful analysis, maybe using all of these different series names. So I would recommend just kind of drilling down into a given one of these. Another quick tip, I guess, is that sometimes it might not be clear what each of these series names means. So when we downloaded the data, another thing we could have done is we could have looked at the metadata. Oh, why is it saying blocked? Why is it saying, oh no, I wonder if we're causing, I don't think, there's not enough people on this live stream to cause it to have issues with the data. What I was trying to say is that we could have also gotten the metadata from our search. So let's see if this works the second time I try this. So I want just internet, take all the internet columns, and then let's, like, it doesn't, for this purpose, I can just use a single year. So maybe I just did 2023. If I clicked download metadata, and I wonder if the metadata will show now. Come on, metadata. Okay. So one thing to note is that, like, sometimes it might be worthwhile to get metadata too. So, like, if you wanted more information about any of these different pieces of data, oftentimes in a data set, you'll have access to something like this metadata that we're accessing right now. So I think specifically the easiest thing to look at to start is this it.net user.zs, which is just the individuals using the internet as a percentage of the population. But it does tell us about where the data is coming from. So it's coming from the International Telecommunication Union. So just kind of cool to see where World Bank is getting their source. And it, gives us some additional information. I'm trying to see if there's this is a little bit more, I guess, interesting. If we look at the secure internet servers column that we extracted, and just kind of, it gives us more information on what that actually means. And if this is hard to understand, any of these columns, like, what I would do is just be like, explain this information. I would paste in this metadata into like ChatGPT or something and be like, explain what the heck this column means. So a little bit of extra information, but I think that everyone here should kind of have a good sense of what percent of population means here for this first column, it.net.user.cs. So I'm going to go back to our data set. And we can go ahead and, what am I about to do? Let's filter our data by just this individuals using the internet. So I'm going to go ahead and do country df equals country df series code. I think series code is easier than trying to match this series name. So I want the series code to be equal to this. And now if you look at our country df, and maybe I call this like percent internet. I hate, like, the issue is the challenge with this is you want to give a descriptive name of your variable, but then within pandas, when you have to work with this variable a ton, it gets frustrating because this is just a long thing to keep typing in. So I'm going to call this CDF. It stands for country data frame, just to make it easier. It doesn't stand for cumulative density function, which is a fun math term. So country data frame, like, I'll just say like percent internet. I don't know. Now it's getting long again. CDF is fine. We'll just use CDF. And now if we look at our CDF, we're going to just have 3 columns. This is just percent internet usage. And now what we could do is we could do that transpose recommendation that someone had. We could also use the melt. I always forget how to do melt off the top of my head. So I'm going to start by doing the transpose option. So I'm going to go ahead and do, basically, we don't want any of these columns right now. We just care about these percent values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do CDF trying to think of the best way to get just those columns. CDF. Now I'm trying to like go back to my iLoc documentation. So iLoc. Let me just do something real quick. I always forget the order of things. So if I did iLoc, let's say 3 onwards, what does this give me? Okay, this gives me the 3rd column onwards. So what I want is I want all rows, so this is good. But what I want here is I want the 1st column, and I want everything after. I'm trying to think if there's something cool you could do is like something like this, I thought. But I think that this is not going to work. Yeah. I thought there was a way I could get creative. Like you could do like something like 1, 3, 5, and we get like different things. I think I'm overcomplicating it. Like I definitely like wouldn't need to do this. I could just drop columns. So I could just do drop columns, and I could drop, I don't need the, let's just look at our data frame again. We just need to drop these 3. So I'm going to just go ahead and do CDF equals CDF.drop columns equals country code, series name, series code. There's different ways to do this, but then I will be just left with a much more manageable to work with data frame. And now the next steps I want to do to actually, like, it's easier for us to work with something that has our years as the rows and the country names as our columns. So a trick we could do to get this I think that, yeah, definitely like melt. Actually, I wonder if this would work right here, this melt it's suggesting me. I don't know if this would exactly work. Anyone in the chat want to put the melt command? I'm trying to think yeah, melt command I think should work. We ultimately want melt or pivot might both work. We want our country names as the columns, the years as the row or as the index, and then the values to stay the same. I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to set my index to be the country name, and this in place equals true just makes it so I don't have to reset things. So now we have the index set as our country name, and if I then I'll just call this final df equals the index set as the country name. I guess let's just show what this looks like first. Oh, this is what always happens with rerunning cells is you change the cell and then you try to rerun something. If we look at CDF now, we see that the index is actually the country name. And what we can do is our final df might be something like cdf.transpose. And this will just basically flip the index and the years. So now we look at final df.head, let's say. We get it nicely in this format, much easier to visualize something like this. And as I kind of mentioned previously, right now we're working within a Jupyter notebook. If I was to do something that I wanted it to be repeatable so that I could run this function and do some analysis on a bunch of different countries, I would start baking some of this code up here into different functions so that we could easily reuse it based on, let's say, an input variable such as our selected countries that we used here. So instead of being, having to be careful to not rerun cells again and again. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But as we can see, we get something like this. Anyone have a different command? So if we look back at CDF, I'm going to have to create a new cell. I don't want to rerun some of this in-place code. That's why sometimes it's better to not do things in place and just set things as different new variables. Because if we rewrite different pieces of memory, if I rewrite CDF, then when I try to rerun this first line here, it won't be able to execute. But if I give each of these steps different logically named things, then it does make more sense. So CDF, if we see this, anyone have another command that we could use to convert the look of this? Basically just to flip the, actually maybe you could have even done it from back here when we had a bit more to work with, but to flip the country names and columns. Also, shout out everyone that has sent a donation. That's awesome. Awesome to see the progress. I can't see it easily on my side, but I did just check. It's awesome to see that we're at $192. That's really cool. And that's matched 1-for-1. So that's ultimately 400 USD. All right. What was I trying to look at? Where is my stream? I lost my window. No. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Anyone know the pivot command? I'm embarrassed because I feel like I always screw up my pivot. But I think it's never bad to have to try something. So I'm going to just do pivot df equals df. So cdf dot pivot. Can I do this easily? I don't know if I can do it easily like this because this is already, The commands I would look at, I'm just going to use my transpose method just so we can kind of keep moving on. But it's some very useful functions to know are pivot and melt here to easily convert this into different formats. Again, though, like I think one thing that I always will say about Python and just learning programming in general, it really, like you don't have to remember always the exact syntax. What I think is important is that I know that these are two commands that could help me here. And if I need to use them, if I need to do something and I don't, remember a transpose method or something like this, I will look up, I will type in like, please convert this using, like I'll look it up, I guess a ChatGPT command or Stack Overflow or something to get the command I need. So I remember that these are helpful functions, but I don't always remember the exact syntax. Just kind of a good, I think, thing to think about. Okay, so we have this kind of final data frame. And I'm going to give this now a more descriptive name, like selected country, internet usage over time, df. And again, this is the challenge. This is such a long name. It's very descriptive. But if I needed to run, useful pandas functions on this, not super ideal because it's so long. But maybe I would like also save this as like 2CSV data / selected countries .csv. Index equals false. And now maybe I just load in. None of this was necessary, but maybe I just switch back to my name, df, so that I can process and visualize things a bit easier here. All right. So I think the next step here would be to visualize this data. So different ways you could do that. A simple way would be to use matplotlib. I could use something like plot. So what is our x-axis? What is our y-axis? Our x variable will be the years. So, oh, shoot, I actually did want to save the index. In this case, I'm going to just go back to my that's not country name. Okay, this works. Our x-axis is going to be our index. So if I do df.index, that's going to be our years. And then our y variable would be like different values here. So like, for example, we could just type in Greenland's internet usage over time. And let's go ahead and do a plot.show. And we see a very pretty graph here of Greenland over time. Obviously, that does not look the best. So you'd want to format that a bit better. I might also do this in Plotly Express potentially. I could do a px.line chart taking in the data frame. Our x-axis is going to be the index. Y is going to be the selected countries. I think I could also do, yeah, I guess this would probably work. Let's see if this works. That's a much better graph. I think it's getting confused though here. And there's also missing data. So if we look at our data, there's a lot of zeros in Greenland's. So we might want to interpolate that or do something with that. Make this a little bit neater. So let's look at the full data. Okay, we're looking at Greenland. I also want to just get some info on our data frame. I might just do df, just to make this explicit, df year equals df.index. Might just duplicate our index real quick. I feel like I sometimes just have an easier time working with columns than working with my index. Just want to see what type that is. The year is an object. We want to convert this to a number just to make things easier. df.to.as type int. Okay, now it's an int64. I feel like this might work a bit better. I'm gonna do okay, that looks much more reasonable. I think why is it getting so confused? Is this also, these values are also objects instead of numbers? They look like zeros here, but I feel like if we looked at the raw data, something weird's going on. So I also want to just make sure that all of my data frame values basically are of type int. Or I guess we don't want them all of type int. We want df equals df as type float. Does this work? Convert all my columns except for one to a float value. Okay, you can do something like this using a little GitHub Copilot to help us. Let's see if this works. That's having trouble too. Like the easiest way, you always have to think about like how much you need to do something. Like it would be very easy to just do df Germany equals this. I know that this works, and that will give us the values that we want. Okay, that's so weird. This is so strange. I know exactly what our issue is. I don't know why it's displaying things weird, why it's saying that this is a 0 when it's not. So if I printed our data frame.head, this is so strange. It's saying 0 here, but ultimately if we look at the actual value, so if I go to our data, why is it? It's saying 0 here. That's weird. I think I might have saved it as that. If we look at our data, it's giving us these 2 dots. So we ultimately like want to make these 2 dots actually a 0. So if we do a replace, and sorry that this is getting a little bit messy, but if we do a df equals df.replace ... with, how about 0 or nan? I think like 0 is totally fine. I guess you don't want to do 0 because that would kind of screw up everything. I would say pd.na here. Let's see what happens here. And I'm going to get rid of this. So we're doing, okay. Let's see our info now. Like we don't want these to be zeros. Like that's what's kind of screwing things up. We want them to be not a number, and then we can kind of interpolate and do things on them. I'm just surprised why it created these zeros in the first place, though. If we got to take a step back, and and this is the challenge too, I feel like, with live streaming and like working with notebooks. Like now we have this kind of looming, just annoying thing with these dots that I want to get rid of, but it's like weird because when I print my data frame, it's showing me zeros instead of the dots. I wonder if there's a way to like show the dots. So I'm just going to go back, run these lines again. Okay. Why? Okay, I'm going to just look this up real quick. Like, why is pandas showing dot as a 0 when I print my data frame? This is weird. Okay, let's try the toString method. Okay, there we go. Oh, I guess these were actually zeros. Okay, that's why I'm getting tripped up. These were actually zeros. That's fine. But we get the NAs down here. Okay. Sorry, I was confused. I was thinking that these should be just the dots, but those, I guess, are actually zeros. Let's just look at the tail real quick. Okay, we see NANs for some of these values that we don't have for Greenland. So if we look at the entire data frame, I just want to see what values are NANs. And I'm trying to think, if I look at this as a scrollable element, it's really just the end values for Greenland here that are NANs. I'm curious if now we can convert all of these columns. Convert my columns Germany, Greenland, and Turkey to float types. I guess we could fill the NANs first. So maybe one thing that would make sense. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. Why is this window still open? Let's look at our data frame. I'm going to show the full data frame again. One useful thing we can do here is we could do df, or like, I'm going to call this interpolated df, df.interpolate. This interpolate function on pandas data frames lets you fill in different pieces of information. One thing that's interesting here, though, is that this is at the very end of the data source, so it probably won't work out of the box. So if I do df equals df.interpolate, let's see what IDF looks like. It doesn't do anything to those columns. But if I went ahead and did something like method equals linear, I think that it would automatically do this. And then I think I can do limit direction equals both. Why are you not filling in values? What I could do is this method spline. I'm going to get into the details of what we're doing here. These NANs don't want to change. Basically, we're trying to get rid of these NANs at the bottom of the IDF. And while we don't have real values, we often can fill with values that kind of would make sense based on the current trends. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I feel like things are being weird though right now. I see someone that has a problem importing matplotlib, how to install this. I would recommend, if you can, just doing like in your terminal pip install matplotlib. Maybe I can attach after this live stream some more concrete resources. But that would install it for me. I feel like everything has gotten very messy in this code, which is frustrating. But I feel like that's just the life of coding sometimes. What I might check is I'm trying to do this interpolate on 3 different columns at once. And so I think what's kind of being tricky is that I'm calling this on all of my data. So what I might do is Germany, specifically get the data frame for Germany, Greenland, and Turkey, and call interpolate on those columns specifically. And then maybe I just save this as those specific values. I'm going to see if this works. And I spelled Turkey wrong again. It is really getting mad at the data types. df. I'm going to try this one more time. df Germany, Greenland. I guess I could just call these selected countries if I wanted to be more precise. I think that there's an errors equals course option I can pass in this as type. Let's see if this works. Okay, we're going to debug. Convert columns to float type pandas and course errors if NANs exist. Or ignore, maybe. See what Google Gemini says here. Okay, we could call pd.toNumeric. That will work. I like this. I'm being this is way more sophisticated than it should be here. Let's see if this works. Come on. I'm sure there's a much more elegant way to do this, but okay, that finally worked, I believe. Let's look at our df info now. Okay, now Germany's afloat. That's good. I'm going to just repeat this code for Greenland and Turkey. Now we got all float columns. There's probably definitely a better way to do this to handle the NANs. I'm now curious to look at the full data frame. That looks pretty good. Okay, we see our NANs. That's great. Okay, now let's just try to interpolate on Greenland, if that makes sense. I just want to fill in data that makes sense for these last few values, just as kind of a proof of that you can do it. What happens if I just do this? Okay, so we see that if you don't give it anything and you just use the base interpolate method, it just takes the last value and copies it. a little bit better of a, so I'm going to call this IDF equals df.copy or something. And then IDF, so this is the interpolated data frame of Greenland. All the other countries have data equals IDF Greenland interpolate. So I'm going to go back and get our df again. And now if we look at IDF, we see that it's, the same values here at the bottom. There's other interpolation methods. It's like a cool thing. Oh, wow, I still have the matplotlib comment on. I still have, so if I do method, how about splines? Look up spline interpolations. They're pretty cool. I'm going to do a quadratic spline. And I think that by default that this should work. But real quick, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to move this to the next line. I just want to show how this changes things. Interpolations are very helpful. And you can do this. Like basically what we're doing is just like an inline regression. Like you can find NaN values and fill them with other methods. And you could use just like a fill NA and fill it with like an average value. But obviously with a time series progression, you kind of want to use either a linear or quadratic, some sort of curve to fill that data in. So if I look at IDF here, and then I do the interpolate, and then I look at the result, I'm going to show you what these two look like. And maybe I'll just do the tail 10. Run this line. Index column must be numeric, or I think okay. So let's see how this worked. Initially, our values looked like this for Greenland, and then it stopped here at the end. I call this interpolate method on it, and then it tries to fill in data for that. And as you can see, this is where our last data point, I guess, was 2017. It actually thinks based off this data for however reason. Maybe I need to do limit direction both. This just basically makes it go in both ways. Let's try this one more time. Interesting. This method is giving us values for these last few. Maybe if we looked at a little bit more, it would actually be more helpful. So if we look at Greenland, I think it uses like 10 data points by default. Do we ever have a decrease in Greenland? Yeah, we actually, let's do tail 20. Now I'm getting into the weeds of the data. I'm trying to see if we ever had decreases. Up to 2017 was what we do actually know in our data. 2017. Maybe just the quadratic is not the best way to use it. Interesting. But there's different ways to interpolate. You could just do like a linear one. I think that the issue is this just fills the last value. I'm spending maybe a bit too much time on the interpolation, but interpolate's helpful to fill in information that you need. I guess getting to our actual line chart using Plotly, if I now pass an IDF, we get a view of what these different countries' internet usage looks like over time. I can zoom in and kind of look at things a little bit more detail. I can zoom out with, I like Plotly because it's interactive. Zoom out, or maybe I'll reset the axis. And as we can see, both Greenland and Germany kind of shot up in the 90s, but then, since then, Turkey's kind of caught up. And the Greenland resident here, if he's still here, might be able to answer this better, but I'm guessing maybe this is leveling off here around 70% due to the native tribes in Greenland maybe not even wanting to access the internet. So some interesting things you can start playing around with here. And that kind of showed a full process from that initial data source to our initial data source to a result like this with some specific selected countries. Again, this Jupyter notebook that we're seeing on the screen is quite messy because it just has a bunch of cells. We were kind of figuring things out as we went. So like if I wanted to make this neater, I might make this into a function. And maybe it's worthwhile me doing that real quick. So I might call this like graph or like, I don't know, what's a good internet usage.py or something like that. I might define a function called compare countries, which takes in a list of countries that we want to pass in, and it uses the code that we had in our Jupyter notebook. I'm trying to think if there's an easy way that I could maybe convince AI to do all of this. Trying to think where we probably would want to break up a couple functions. We'd want to do a function for cleaning our raw data. So I might have a function called get cleaned data that takes in our World Bank raw data, and it outputs, maybe it takes in this, maybe it takes in the series that we want to look at, the series code, and maybe it also takes in, could also take in the countries here. Maybe we just do a get clean data that takes in these three parameters. And then basically we would take all of this code above here. You would maybe repeat the same process. And just, let's see, I'm debating whether it's worthwhile doing this. Import janitor, import. I'll share all this code too. Okay. Basically just paste all of the code that we had in our messy Jupyter notebook. And I think it is worthwhile doing this just so you can see what is useful here. We want to take this stuff. Don't need the print statement. So now we have our selected years, selected columns. What else do we need to do here? Maybe we take the select countries, and maybe that comes from the countries here. So country df would be equal to something like this. And it wasn't country code, it was country name here, but you could use country code or country name. And then series df equals this. And then I think we could basically just, maybe this would work out of the box, but turn our series df. I'm curious what this will give us if we try to run this function. So if I'm just kind of showing this as a process that you might use if you're, like, let's say doing some analysis and then you get things working, but you want to have more repeatable ways to process things. So this would be, our data is data slash World Bank country internet data. Read that. Internet usage. This looks good. I might just use the same countries we had just to check to see if it works as expected. Turkey, Germany, Greenland. And then let's see what happens if we run this file. Saying we don't have a file called World Bank country internet data. I think we do, but I guess it's called .csv. Let's try running this file. And look at that, it gives us the output we see here. So run that one more time. And then if we really wanted to, we could just take, get rid of the columns that we don't need. And you could name this whatever you wanted, but maybe I do final df equals series df, and I copy that drop line that we had. And then we could even, if we wanted to, do the whole transpose stuff. And I still would probably like get this function working, and then I might break this up into even more functions. I might not go into all of this in the live stream. I feel like I'm kind of rambling on a bunch of different things, but my goal is to just show kind of real world ways to approach things. And I feel like my typical real world way to approach any sort of data science, data analysis task is to get things working and then be like, okay, it works now. Let's make this reusable. So I'm going to start making functions out of my code that works. And maybe it makes more sense to do it the other way, make the functions first. Different people have different preferences, but that's what I'm trying to kind of show, I guess. The naming I might play around with. Final df dot set index, and then what was the last step was to transpose it. There's a couple of final dfs, so I think this dot transpose works, or you can do dot t. Okay. There's a lot here. I would probably clean this up. I might even pass this into a function to clean up, but if I run this file, we now get exactly the kind of data that we wanted to, and we see the dots here. So everything is a lot easier now to work with. I might also want to make sure we do the, this is what I hate, is there's a lot of steps here, and you can use there's that chaining syntax within Pandas, which probably would make sense for me to highlight in a video. But I'm kind of writing these all as single lines. There's ways to kind of chain these commands around so you don't have to do all these intermediate steps. But I might also want to make sure that I repeat some of these last final steps, which was replacing this making the I don't necessarily need a year. I didn't copy that code. I'm totally fine with if I run this again. This is what our data frame looks like now. What else do we need to do? I do want to copy the code that makes these numeric types. So I might tell Copilot for each country in countries, column name, df, execute the following int or float conversion or numeric conversion. Okay. And it's not quite this because oh, actually this would work, yeah. Let's now just do this. Okay, this looks good. This is all floats. And now we could pass in basically any country we wanted to. So I could do something like, I saw Iceland before. I could run this, Alt-Shift-N. We see now we get Iceland in the results. Oh, Iceland has great internet coverage. I could do something like, let's see. I guess we could take this function into our notebook. Hopefully some of this is making sense. I definitely struggle sometimes with showing how to do certain things or showing things neatly when I'm working in a live stream setting. So import, what do we want to import? We want to import that function that we just created, which was called internet usage. And we could do internet usage.getCleanedData, the World Bank data we need to provide, and we loaded that way at the top. I'll repeat this line. So I'm just kind of showing another way now to do basically what we did with all of our notebook. I'm going to call this WB for World Bank. WB. And now we get, as you can see, internet usage data for other countries. I could pass in the United States, or I could pass in India. I could pass in United States. And another thing you would want to do is like make things more robust. And then we could start visualizing all of this. So if I go ahead and copy basically the line we had before, if I pass in now internet usage here, oh, I guess I should name this something else. So internet stats. Year doesn't work. We want to use the index. All right, we're very close to just having this function work. I will make sure that all this code is uploaded. Okay, so we have this. Cool. If we look at the info on that, they're all float types. I might do internet stats equals internet stats interpolate. Does this work? Now if we look at internet stats, does that give us values? Okay, this gives us at least values for everyone. We don't have any NANs. It does kind of just repeat the end instead of filling it in anything useful. I'm wondering now if this px.line function will work. Oh, oops. Selected countries. Y should be. This is weird. Countries. Pass in the countries. I think this should work now. There we go. Cool. And you could play around with this. You could, save this. I think there's a save button here on download plot as PNG. I could zoom in on things. See, India is still, which I'm kind of surprised that it's 43. It's just India is such a highly populous country, but part of the reasons that Give Internet, the fundraiser that we're raising money for, is working in India, as we can see. It kind of just levels out. I think that this increases a bit. So if we used an interpolate like Spline method, so Spline or method equals Spline order. Let's see if this would work. Order equals 2. I'm curious if this will change the look of this graph. I'm going to run this again. Internet stats dot index equals so one thing that's cool is, as you can see with the spline value, this now increases a bunch. I don't think that this is maybe it's right, but I think if you actually look at the values, they do not think that India also this it ended United States above 100%. So I guess this method didn't work the best. But you can play around with different regression methods to kind of interpolate the data in a way that makes sense. This kind of just cuts off the last value. Any other countries we should look at? So this is looking at internet usage over time. We very easily could change this to be one of the other parameters that we have. So individuals, let's say, using the internet female. So I might copy this code in. So let's see maybe the female usage in these different places. And if I remember looking at the data correctly, some of these did not have nearly as much information. So India, I don't think has much information on the female percentage. As you can kind of see, it kind of just doesn't give us a lot to work with. It might be only a single value at all in the data set. Iceland's a little bit more complete. We could look at male. I think that's ME. Maybe I typed that in wrong. Let's see. What is the male version? Oh, it's MA. That makes sense. FE for female, MA for male. Okay, so yeah, also not a ton of information. I'm very surprised. This seems off. 74% of United States male. Seems like it would be higher. I'm going to just do the full. I think the best accuracy is going to be the full percent of population, not percent of males or percent of females. As you can see, both of those are close to 100% for Iceland and United States, which makes much more sense. There are, certain segments of the United States population that, is not going to have access to internet, maybe by cultural choice. Maybe it's a member of a native tribe, etc. I'm going to pause there, though. I'm going to do some other, analysis stuff because I took way too much time like cleaning up some of this data where we didn't actually answer many of the questions that I intended to, but hopefully it's still educational. But I'm going to pause there for a sec. Any questions on anything that we've covered or questions on Give Internet, who we're raising money for today? I mentioned this very briefly. Can I donate? Okay, we're gonna try something. Hopefully you can still see the screen. I lost my. I lost where my live stream is coming from. Okay. Hopefully you can see this. I'm little streamception. I'm now sharing the stream. What I said at the start, this didn't work at all. Let's see. How do I donate? What I was trying to say, add another $25 donation on my side. Hopefully this doesn't, yeah, it hides all my information. Good. What I was trying to say is you guys were free to type in after I donate, do some push-ups. I'm going to do some push-ups right now. Didn't really work, but 25 push-ups just because I want to do something. How's the view? Yeah, that's good enough. Yeah, you can't probably see these at all. I was trying to think I could take breaks from the stream throughout and do something like this, but I didn't really make that clear. All right, there was my 25. All right, I'm ready to go. Now I'm ready to go. Now we can do some more analysis. I think the last thing I wanted to do, like we could have definitely dove into questions more. But I think we should look at some high level, kind of for all countries, look at some information. So this get clean data function maybe isn't the most useful. I guess I could change this up a bit so that if I don't filter by countries, it could just use a bunch of countries. I'm trying to think how I can do this. All right. So what I want to do real quick is I want to look at some like trends. Like I want to find certain countries that are maybe like have the least access. So I think like a quick thing we might do is if we look at like our original data. So if I just look up World Bank, what we could do is maybe look at a specific year. It's like 2020, for example. So I might do World Bank 2020 equals World Bank. Maybe I just grab the series code, and I want to clean this. How did this work? Some of this is cleaned. It's interesting how memory works in. Okay, so some other like analysis I might do. We kind of spent a lot of time on like that transpose and stuff. But what I might do is I might just get the series code that's internet usage. So we have this. I might just look at a year like 2020 So I might just grab only the columns, country name. Thank you for whoever liked my hairstyle. Country name, and then let's say like 2020. Let's just look at, save this as World Bank 2020. And let's look at World Bank 2020. All right. What we might want to do, like as another just interesting thing to look at, is you could just do sort values. I guess, yeah. By 2020, ascending. Do we want ascending order? Ascending equals false makes sense. Ascending equals true. So these are the top countries in 2020. And maybe we make this even 2023, but some people didn't have data, so I guess it's, let's see if this works. So in 2023, these are the top countries of internet usage. But some of these are missing. So like I feel like the 2020, we actually saw more values. And I might like, a good practice is like, if I have a variable like this in two places, I might do selected year equals 2020. And I might even specify that this is like a mutable variable, kind of a static variable by using uppercase. It doesn't actually change any of the functionality, but it just might make it more clear to me that this is not changing. And then I would make this selected year. So if I run these now, 2020, we see actually more with 99%. I think it's just because some of these values haven't been filled in on the more recent years. But then if we looked at ascending equals true, which I think is the default, we can see some of the lowest values, which I guess these are all NANs. So maybe we go to like 2016 or something. Or we could do, in our filter here, we could do series code equals this, and WB for the year that we have selected. So our selected year is not equal to ... Then I would surround these conditions with parentheses. And so this would be kind of like not equals ... would also be kind of equivalent to as like non-NaN or not null. Does this work? There we go. So we see places here. WB stands for World Bank. So our data is just coming from World Bank. So I just, as an abbreviation, instead of using DF, I'm using World Bank right now. So in the selected year of 2016, we have like Eritrea, Somalia, Democratic Republic of the Congo, all some of the lowest places. If we move this to like 2020, I don't know what happened there. Let's try this again. Did I screw something up? I don't know why it thinks 100. I don't know if there's something weird that happened to this UAE number, but in 2020, the values that are not null, we have like Yemen, Niger, Somalia, some of the lowest. So like all these different things, like I'm showing some techniques to get answers to different questions, which are all very, very useful. I think one last thing that I want to do is one last thing that I want to do is I think one cool thing would be to see who is increasing the most, at least in recent years. It seems like we're missing a lot of data, so I might do this over like until 2020. But if we get our cleaned data for all countries, so I guess what I could do if I really wanted all countries is I could do something like, I'll show what I mean here. Take this, I'm going to create a new cell. I'm going to do what countries are increasing the most in recent years. So if I wanted all countries, I probably should change up how this function works. I feel like I'm not great at making very clean code while doing a live stream. But what I could do as a simple thing is I could get the unique country name values. So I could do World Bank country name.unique here. And I think the data cleaning is being all weird. I should have made it a little bit more clear when I'm cleaning what. But if I did this, shoot, this might mess something up. Ignore this. This is one spot that we have it as our original name. If I look at internet stats, we have all the different countries in that nicely formatted way that we dealt with before. So one cool thing that we could do, I'm trying to think what the best way to do this is. It might honestly be better to do it. Basically, I want to use this shift function. So if I look at like the tail 10, or basically there's a shift function. So I'm going to create a sample data frame with columns A, B, C, and numbers as values. I just want to show a toy example of what I'm talking about because this could be useful if you wanted to see what is growing the most in this data using pandas. So if we look at our sample DF, I could create a new column called like sample DF shifted C, which is equal to sample DF C, and then shifted, how about 2? And now if we look at this data frame, we have the C shifted 2 spots. So now if I wanted to see the percent change of C, I could do percent change, which is equal to, oh shoot, does this actually, maybe this percent change function just works. Maybe that would actually be a better way to do it. I'm curious. I was going to do this kind of manually, but maybe we just learned a new function that I didn't actually know. Percent change. I don't really know how this function works. I would have to look at the documentation. What I was thinking we could do is just do percent change equals sample DFC divided by, it's the new value divided by the original value, shifted C. And if we look at that, so like from, and maybe it makes more sense if I just shifted it by 1. So like from this value to the value below it, so from that row, we went up 9% about. From 13 to 12, we went up about 8%. You could even do like 1 minus this to get your percent change. So this would be up 9%, or is it, sorry, it's this value minus 1. I think we could, but we see that we get, so I was thinking that like it'd be cool to see what's growing the most, and maybe I should just use this percent change. I'm going to look this up on Google real quick. I'm looking at the chat right now. Shout out Michael, who has a interview. Good luck with your interview. Hopefully you crush it with the pandas and NumPy stuff. I also see a question about my games. What do you use to plan all your games on? I don't know. What games are we talking about? I'm going to look up this percent change function real quick because I feel like that could be very useful with pandas. Percent change pandas docs. The difference between the value. Percent change between the percentage difference between the values in the current row and the previous row. Okay, so what we want to do here, and this will be, I think, the last thing that we cover in this tutorial, and I'm going to just kind of show how I would use AI, I guess, to help me in a situation like this. So we have this data frame that we've been looking at, all of these countries, right, and the percentage internet usage for a given year for that country. What I want is a equivalent, basically, data frame that's just the percent differences from each row. And so what I might do to figure this out is I might just grab internet stats. I might just get like some of the columns. So I'm going to do iloc. I'm going to get all of the rows and some of the columns. So how about like the first 5 columns and get the tail of that? Okay. So we have this. And I don't need the tail. I'm going to just get the full. I could. Yeah, I guess the tail's fine. Yeah, I think I will use percent change without shifting, but I'm going to just. Actually, yeah, I guess that should work. I think if we just did, let's see, percent changes, sometimes it's as easy as just a simple comment. What happens here? And if we look at percent changes, actually, wow, the shifting was way overly complex. We could have just done percent change. This is exactly what I wanted. So thank you for the recommendation, Michael. So what we see here is the percent change from each row to the next row. So what we could do is like for a given year, how about? Or you could even like lump this if you wanted to. If you got more creative, you could lump this in like groups of 5 or something. So you could take the mean or something of the past 5 years and then do percent change. But what we could do is something like, we have this percent changes data frame now, and for a given year, so I could do something like .loc 2020, and we could just look at this value. So this is now a series for 2020, and I could take the max value. I want not only the max value, but the column that has the max value. Given a series in pandas, return the column that has the max value and the max value. I don't really use, oh, okay. I'm just looking at some comments right now. Okay, yeah. Max column, max value, index max and max. So we would get Okay. So like, for example, in the year 2020, Somalia increased the most year over year with a percentage increase of 6%. If we looked at, again, we could do the kind of selected year thing. So maybe I go to 2023. And largely the index min is probably not going to matter much. Maybe it could, because you might see negative values. Low income, that's not very helpful. I think if we look at like 2015, I can't pronounce this country. If we looked then, you could also get the min, so index min, and min. So I'm curious, for the year 2015, looks like Cambodia went down in internet percentage use. 2020, Yemen went down just a bit, it's saying. So a lot of cool things we can do using this percent change. You could look at, if you got more creative, you could do some fun stuff here. And I'm trying to think, given a series, so instead of using index max, I'm trying to think of pandas data, return the max 5 indices and the max 5 values. I'm curious if we could expand this to 5 easily, like getting the top 5 and largest. Yeah, that's another good function. So if we looked at the n largest indices and values, that also is cool. So like, and you could even pair this up nicely. You can make this a data frame if you wanted to. So I could do something like df equals, or results equals pd.dataframe. The data is going to be top 5 values, and the columns are going to be top 5 indices. And now if I looked at results, I think that should work. Maybe I have to pass these in as lists. One sec. I'll answer some questions in a sec. I'm going to just finish this up. Why does this not work? I would expect that this would work. I must have copied something weirdly. Some weird blank space after this. I just want to get this last value. What is the last value here? Should all. Okay. Like I use Copilot a lot to do things. I guess I could do it this way. So you could do something like this. I was trying to make these the columns, but this works too. All right, I see. I'll have to check out Polymars. As far as whiteboards go, I guess recently one platform I've used a bunch to generate like slideshows and stuff, and I've done a partnership with them, is Pause It. And if you create a slideshow via pause it in like the reveal.js format. So I guess specifically reveal.js. So this is like a JavaScript based framework. If I create slideshows with reveal.js, it has a whiteboard feature built in. So I sometimes use that. I'm trying to think of other ways. I'm trying to think of, yeah, I don't know. I guess I haven't done a lot of drawing on the screen recently. I have this, like, if I get it, it's not working on my Mac anymore, but I have this Wacom tablet. I guess you can't see because I have this Wacom tablet that I used to have like software for where I could just draw things using the pen on this and like it would show up on the screen. So I used to tutor a bunch of math on the computer, and like having a tablet like this was super, super helpful where I could just like write out the math equations. But I haven't, I guess, done a lot recently. I am analyzing the data. What I was checking right now was what countries had the most growth in 2020. So we see Somalia leading the way with Libya and Republic of Congo, Ghana, etc. I'm curious if we looked at like 2018, how that would change. I think it would be interesting to look at if you just took, let's say, in our data. So we have our internet stats. I feel like it'd be interesting. I'm going to try something real quick. If I just took the rows, if I did something like internet stats and I want only, let's say, every fifth row. So I'm going to do iloc this. So watch what happens if I print this. So this gives us every fifth row. And so now it'd be kind of interesting if I said internet stats equals internet stats with only every fifth row, run this. And then I ran the percent change function here on 2020. Then we're seeing the overall biggest increase from 2015 to 2020. So it might be more of a significance. Yeah, I guess, Michael, what I'm showing right now is the 5-year period. So like Eritrea from 2015 to 2020 increased, 20%, Sudan 20%. So some cool stuff to see. You could even skip, every 10th year. See 1,000% increase in Sudan over that period. I mean, if you have, let's say, 2% of if you have 0.01% of your population and then it, gets to 10%, that's 1,000% increase. So maybe that's a 0 or something that was listed in the 2000 period, basically 0, or 2010. Any other questions? I apologize that some of this was kind of scattered around. And I think in an ideal world, I kind of showed the analysis process, but in an ideal world, I would take all of this analysis and package it in a much more meaningful way. So it's very clear. Some of the things that we saw, you'd have clear answers of okay, this is what we looked at. This is what we found. Whereas this is kind of just a scattered, look at a bunch of different things. My preferred language is Python. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Anyone have any questions on any of this? I will upload all of the code that we dealt with here to the GitHub repo that's linked in the description. So I'm curious to check out the live stream. We're at last chance to donate, and feel free to donate. Like my last donation, I donated and then I commented push-ups, and I will do any exercise you put in there within reason. If you do make a donation, I will do it in these last 10 to 15 minutes. But I'm also happy to just answer some questions right now. This is a good question. We kind of answered this a little bit earlier, but I mean, what I'd recommend is like, the first step is you want to kind of just explore the data a little bit, see what's in your data. Once you've done the basic data exploration, I would say ask yourself questions on like what you find interesting, or maybe you're working in a company setting and ask them what they want to know given this data. Like most companies, even if they're not Python data scientists or data analysts, they'll be comfortable in Excel. They can kind of poke around the data in Excel, and they might have some questions about the data. And so I'd kind of just write down all of those questions that they have. And then in my head, I just pick off those questions. So like one of the questions we had was trends over time. So I know that that's a question. And so I'm going to break it down into simpler steps. So maybe I have to, manipulate the data frame a bit to get to a point where I can easily showcase trends over time. So I'm just basically trying to gather questions, and then I break down each one of those questions to do what I want to do with the data. And then ultimately try to package all those results into a nice report or something, which we kind of skipped over given we're already 2 hours into this live stream. I mean, there's definitely no answer with how many columns should be in your data. I just find oftentimes if you have tons and tons of columns in your data, it gets hard to work with. So I typically go from like a big data frame or a data source, and then you kind of want to just narrow your data down to a point where it's more manageable to work with. But there's no one right answer here. Am I able to make a timer with sounds? You could definitely do that in Python if you wanted to. I'm trying to think how I do it in Python. Maybe I would use like tkinter in Python to make like a little graphical user interface timer. I think PyQt, it's a fun name. PyQt5, I think, is also a popular way to do it. Yeah, I have probably some videos you could look at building models. I think, my background comes in the language processing space. And I think right now, honestly, with like NLP, basically all of the most of the work that I do, I feel like I just piggyback off of the large language model companies, and maybe I'll do a little bit of fine tuning in addition to that. But like the sklearn library, I actually did I think a recent like logistic regression video. So if you check my recent videos, maybe I'll find it and link it in the chat. You could see a very basic, it's kind of a trivial example of a sklearn model. So maybe I'll share a couple links. One sec. Okay, here's a real. I shared a link. Hopefully that goes through. I'm going to check the live stream to see if the link went in the chat. It should be because it's sending from me. Yeah, check out that link if you want to see a modeling question. I see a question about real-world projects. I keep losing. Some real-world projects. Have done a bunch. I feel like some I'm still in the works of, so I might not go into super detailed information. So one cool project from probably a couple years ago now, very YouTube, I guess, specific projects. So in addition to making these YouTube videos, I spent a lot of my time freelancing and doing different types of projects for various companies. A company reached out to me to basically try to help them find good YouTube creators that might fit their might fit their target demographic. They were basically looking to not get into like too specifics, but they were just looking basically for YouTube content creators that had a team. So imagine that you're a big YouTube creator. You probably have an editor. Maybe you have a dedicated videographer. And so they wanted to be able to build a payment platform where these creators could easily split their revenue between, let's say, the YouTube creator, the editor, the videographer, and a number of other people that could be part of their team. And so what I did for this company was I used the YouTube API to basically look through a bunch of, they had like a list of potential creators they wanted to look at that met a certain criteria. So like, let's say 100,000 plus subscribers. So they had this list. And basically I programmatically looked through their YouTube videos, and I looked to see which of those creators consistently had mentions of like an editor, a videographer, etc. in their videos. And basically what I returned back to the client was like, hey, these are the creators that in like, let's say 80% or more of their videos mention an editor and a videographer, and I think that they would be good for you to target. So it's kind of a combination of like understanding how people write their YouTube descriptions, and then basically writing a program to automatically try to find information in the YouTube video description that would represent that creator is probably part of a big team, and then basically filter that list down to just the creators that they're most interested in. So I haven't really scraped YouTube, and the reason I haven't scraped YouTube is because YouTube has an API, and I would say that web scraping is super, super powerful. But if you ever are trying to web scrape a website that already has an API, usually you're going to just have better success using their built-in application programming interface, their API. So like because YouTube has an API, I did things via their API versus trying to do special like beautiful soup or Selenium scraping. So yeah, the API is kind of the better use case for YouTube specifically. So I didn't try scraping it. I basically scraped it programmatically by using their API. I found a bunch of creators, I found their channels, but this was all like done through ways that YouTube allows. I didn't want to anger YouTube. I'm not sure if it has an API for personal history, like what videos maybe you watched or whatnot. Another kind of cool project, just because it's documented on YouTube, is I did a kind of a historical research analysis project about, I don't know, a year ago now, 2 years ago, over the past kind of 2 years. Basically, we had a bunch of historical documents from what's known as the Freedmen's Bureau. So the Freedmen's Bureau was set up in the United States after the end of the Civil War to basically help aid formerly enslaved individuals and kind of help them transition into this post-Civil War American society. And there's a bunch of documents from that bureau. And basically, I was on a team. I helped kind of manage a team to analyze all of these hundreds of thousands of documents from that bureau and see if we could figure out insights from those documents. And given this was this was a paid freelance project, but one cool thing is I did make a video very much going into details on how we approach this project. So I'm also going to share in the chat the solving real-world data science problems with LLMs video that I made previously. I recommend checking out. Honestly, the AI models are probably even better now than when I was using that, but it kind of shows some cool ways that you can be creative and leverage large language models in a real-world use case. So I recommend checking out the Solving Real-World Data Science Problems with LLMs video that I shared in the chat, but also you can just look at my channel to find. I see another question. Have you ever done project in IoT and smart homes project or know something about it? I feel like this goes way, way back, and I feel like I always reference what I've already done on my YouTube channel. Have programmed Amazon Alexas to do special things. I actually have, I think, some of my earliest videos ever on my channel. I'm just going to be shamelessly promoting myself right now, but some of my oldest videos on this channel show how to program Alexa, but it probably is outdated at this point. But if you're curious, I can share this video from 6 years ago, and maybe there's still some tidbits of useful information. I haven't done a lot recently. I feel like it would be cool to do more IoT things. It would also be really cool to, I feel like, document, like, let's say maybe using Philips Hue lights or like using, let's say, Alexa or something, like integrating all these different components and having really cool like voice commands to trigger a bunch of different things all at once. I feel like that would be really cool to document because you could show the educational component, but there's also a pretty entertaining component. If I say like code red and my entire house turns red, like that would be fun. So definitely something maybe to explore in the future. This is an interesting question. What courses / certifications do you recommend for data science? I feel like my perspective is like, I don't have as formed of a perspective here as I could, because I kind of went down the traditional path. I got a degree in computer science, etc. So I don't know. I'm not like the most educated on, certifications or courses that kind of are accessible to anyone. I mean, I personally, like, there's no actual, I think, certification maybe that comes out of it, but there's a lot of great MIT open courseware stuff. I guess I'm biased on the MIT side. So looking up like MIT OCW, you can find a lot of good courses. But in a lot of regards for like data science, I would specifically just focus on learning Python first. And honestly, just watching YouTube videos is a great way to do that. And then once you get to a certain point with your Python knowledge, just think of something cool that you can build. I'm trying to think of like, I feel like this is always the question of like, I'll build a cool portfolio project. Trying to think of a cool, like, simple example that I might do. So I guess a cool project that I have an idea for that maybe I'll make a video on at some point, but just to give you an example, like think about things in your daily life that maybe you could use Python or code to like help improve or do something cool with. Something for me is that I've been going to the gym a lot recently, and I document my workouts in like a little notebook, but I just like, I don't want to use my phone while I'm at the gym. So I just write my workouts down in my little notebook. A cool Python project I might recommend building off of this like concept is like, I would love to convert my written notebook, basically take like pictures of each page and then write a Python program to automatically convert that into text and then format the text and like store it as like in a database or something like that. Like that full project would be an excellent project. And if I was trying to get a job in data science, if I was able to document that project well, and this is a more complex project, you don't have to have a project that's as complex as this, but if I was to document a project like that and then like just share it with an employer, and I have videos on, how to make your GitHub more interesting and whatnot, but like if I shared a cool project like that with an employer, I think that oftentimes goes as far as like showing a certification or even a degree sometimes. So building cool projects and really building you want to get to the point where if you had an idea and you could logically think about the steps that you need to take, like to execute on that idea, that you could convert that into code. So you want to be like comfortable with just building projects and starting from blank slates and knowing how to churn logic into code. I rambled on a bit there, but hopefully that kind of makes sense to what I'm saying on the answer. I don't know if I understand exactly what you're saying here. Oh, just maybe like teaching courses. You feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn regarding like stuff like that. A good question here though is freelance work. How do you get freelance work? I've probably said this before, but just to kind of reiterate on getting freelance work, I recommend like trying to figure out a skill that's like very, very needed in the freelance world. So like I do a lot of freelance work on Upwork, and a ton of people need help scraping websites. So like my first goal would be to get good at scraping websites. Directly scraping websites. And on Upwork, let's say, like I would start trying to market my skills pretty cheaply, like maybe below what I'm worth. But what I want to do is get a couple projects under my belt that I can get some reviews for. So like if you can earn a couple 5-star reviews doing a project for, very little money, those 5-star reviews will go a long way that you can start, doubling how much you charge each project. Like you basically start slow with a skill like web scraping, get really good at web scraping. And then, each time you get a new client, charge a bit more than the last time. And I feel like this slow build up, you can accumulate some reviews in a platform like Upwork, and then can kind of like take that and run with it, and it becomes bigger and better opportunities. I don't know if that made sense at all. I'm like getting a little tired, so I might jump off in a sec. Thank you, Michael. And yeah, obviously no pressure to donate, but if anyone has the ability to donate, we're ultimately just trying to get more people access to laptops, internet access, etc. Anyone else have questions? I might head out in a second. If anyone else wants to make a final donation, actually the donation will still be there, but I would, if there's anyone that's been on the fence, now's the time to do it. But it will be there after this live stream ends. I'll leave it up. At least I think right now it's set up to stay up for 50 days. But have I developed an agentic AI app? Done a little bit here at a startup that I was working at. I wasn't super directly writing a lot of the agent type code myself, but basically we had this AI coach, and sometimes we would want it to just, like this is kind of making it a little bit more trivial than it is, but sometimes let's say we just wanted an LLM like ChatGPT to directly respond to the query. And then other times maybe it was something like, hey, what is the weather today? Where we knew that the AI from ChatGPT wouldn't know the answer to like, what is the weather today without going to scrape the web. So like the agentic component was trying to figure out what tool to use when. So sometimes to use a search, sometimes to just use ChatGPT, sometimes to use ChatGPT with like extra context we sprinkled in. So I've done a little bit of that. It might be something to explore more in a video in the future or something. I've solved many leak code questions over the years. I would recommend like one strategy I like with leak code is if you're learning Python and like still kind of developing, leak code is a great way to get your logic skills down. So like what I recommend to some people that I teach Python to is like maybe just set the habit of doing one leak code problem a day. Like first thing when you wake up, do your leak code problem, then carry out your day, or maybe the last thing you do before bed. But if you can set that consistent practice, leak code, I think, can go a long way because you build up that muscle memory for how to like logically think about problems in Python. So there's no like one right answer to how many that you should solve, but if you're learning Python, doing a few each day is a good approach. Or like doing one each day and just trying to be consistent is oftentimes better than trying to power through a ton in one day and like cram. I would also, I guess, add to my answer that you want to kind of vary what types of things you practice on leak code. They do a good job of breaking it down into like different categories. So maybe do, some data structure stuff one day and then maybe look at like dynamic programming in the next, etc. All right. Any last things? I'm going to check the stream. I'm curious what the donations are at. I think it's still $252, I see. But I do see some people donated via the website. But $252, that's awesome. So I love to see any amount. And all the donations are getting matched. So even if it's $1, $2, anything, I encourage anyone to donate. But I appreciate everyone that has. And I also know that not everyone can. But hopefully this was educational. I had fun. I definitely got tripped up a bit throughout times during the session. This session will stay up as if you look at the live stream tab of my YouTube channel. This video will remain up for the entirety of my YouTube history. I might try to also go back and retroactively type up some timeline stuff for what we did when, so people can navigate it a bit easier because it is 3 hours. But it will be up. It's here for you to watch. I'm sorry that you just joined. At least you know that it will be up. Yeah, I think that's about it. Maybe I'll do one more question if there's one more question in the chat. Thank you, Michael. You have a good day, month, and year as well. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This was fun. Hopefully, I will share some new YouTube videos soon. I'm finishing up a couple projects, and then I'll kind of get back to being a bit more disciplined here on YouTube. I'll try to do some more live streams as well. Till next time, everyone, thanks for watching. Thank you for Give Internet for reaching out to me and providing the opportunity to do some positive and try to raise some money. I think that's one thing that I would like to do more of with my channel is just try to give back a bit. I think I sometimes get siloed and just think about uploading the next video, but kind of forget the human aspect that's involved. I don't know, just the human aspect of having a platform like YouTube and being able to share content with people from all around the world. So hope to do more stuff like this in the future. All right. Take care, everyone. Peace.